So hi, my name's Wes Floyd. I've been a member of the Bacalhau team for the past year, and a lot of you folks in the audience, I've been fortunate to work with you guys directly as members of the Computer Over Data Working Group. And the talk for today is going to be around two components. One, the supply of all these fantastic projects that are building decentralized infrastructure. Storage, compute, ML services. And the other piece is the demand for Web3 compute. Where is it coming from? What's driving that demand? And then which opportunities exist to bring the two together. So, a little bit of background. For my background, I spent a lot of time in enterprise. I was with Apache Hadoop ecosystem. I spent some time at IBM doing consulting. I was fortunate to have kind of a dual situation where I was working for public clouds during the day, and then I was mining Ethereum and helping support that network in the evening. Then after that, was able to do some grants work for a couple of DeFi protocols and learn more about what makes them tick and what drives their technology adoption decisions. And then during that time, I was very passionate about decentralized compute, and I've been very fortunate to be part of the team at Bacalhau building decentralized compute for the past year. Woohoo! Team Bacalhau. And also helping start this Computer Over Data Working Group, which I'm extremely appreciative for everybody who's showed up for these events. And so a little bit about my own passion for the space. There was an article a couple years ago by a person named Moxie Marlinspike, who was a very well-known Web2 developer, and he wrote a blog that received a lot of attention. This is sort of in the middle of the last bull market. And he went out and he looked at all the smart contracts and how they work and what you can do, NFTs and other things. And effectively, his conclusion was that Web3 was not ready for prime time. It was a couple of like trick projects that were somewhat interesting technologically, but they didn't really serve developers, was his opinion. You can write smart contracts, you can do some things with them, you can do some fun things with NFTs, but it's not really ready for prime time. And so for me personally, having witnessed, the Bitcoin movement and Ethereum and then DeFi on top of that, I felt like people are going to build more sophisticated compute infrastructures. People in this room are doing that today. And so I wanted to be a part of the teams that were helping build that infrastructure. And so that leads us into this talk because there's so much good stuff going on. There needs to be some more awareness. So let's start with like the reason, like what is the big problem for developers as it is today? From a Web2 perspective, developers are very well served. They have so many technology choices available. It's easy to find those technology choices. If you go to a major cloud provider, you're given, do you want to run a server? Do you want to store some data? Do you want to run a database service? And this is true across multiple large competitors. The pricing is very competitive. The education is very effective. It's a very positive experience for them. And then further, if you're trying to learn more about what's available outside of these folks, there's a lot of sources of information to make your process easy. You can go to Gartner. You can learn about who are the top vendors in this individual space. You can go to, I believe this is product. Oh, this is G2. G2 is another one for SaaS products you can go to. You can get reviews. You can get some awareness. What's out there? What do people think about these? And similar for things like Product Hunt. So both the supply of all these folks who are building in Web2 and the user demand is very well curated. There's industries around this. And then if you go to Web3 and you say, oh, I'm a new person building in Web3, I would like to know everything that's out there and everything that's available. You're met with a difficult situation. There's not as many tools in the space to connect folks in the same way. And this is a problem that I think can be addressed. So even if you go and let's say you Google search for what are the decentralized infrastructure options for Web3, you're met with content. There's been a lot of content written about it, but it's not necessarily been curated in a way that's easy for a new developer to understand. You can go to some of the major vendors in the space like Protocol Labs or Chainlink, and you can see what they have to offer, but it's not necessarily the same comprehensive view that you might get from Web2 solutions. And so let's talk a little bit about the different categories driving demand. Interesting anecdote. I don't know if you guys have had the same conversation, people who are building in this space, but I have the good fortune to talk to a lot of builders in the Web3 space, people building these platforms, and occasionally I hear folks say there's not enough demand. We built this great platform, but there's just not enough people that want decentralized infrastructure. And I think in some senses that's a valid point because, these developers, it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. People will build on decentralized infrastructure when there is better decentralized infrastructure. But if you look at all the different categories of folks who are building in Web3 today, you have a broad list of categories. You have decentralized finance, by far the largest in terms of market cap. You've got decentralized social media, which is burgeoning. There's a lot of people that are dissatisfied with existing Web 2 situations where the company owns your data. They want to give data ownership back to the user. You've got decentralized AI, which is a tremendously valuable space. Lots of concerns around when the AI is built, who does it serve and how does it serve them and how does the safety come into play, which decentralization can help with. Decentralized science movement, which is very busy right now. We've got some folks from LabDAO who spoke yesterday. In order for them to provide value to their end users, if the batch compute workload is decentralized, it makes the whole offering more valuable and legitimate. Decentralized art, decentralized nature markets. We had the folks in New Atlantis speak yesterday and talk about how if you're going to have energy credits or nature-based credits, if that's transparent and decentralized, it's more legitimate, it's more valuable. Decentralized streaming media, there's software development folks, Radical's a good, interesting GitHub alternative. And then even in the Web3 space itself, the underlying plumbing, the validators, the sequencers, and other things, those themselves can be decentralized to make the platforms more valuable. And so the list goes on. Effectively, there is a tremendous amount of demand, but that demand is siloed. It's off on its own. And unless you spend all your time in this space, it's very difficult to have the full visibility. And so on the supply side, we've obviously, this is a screenshot from cod.cloud, our website. We've been fortunate to have a lot of folks come on and give talks about what they're building and why they're building. And there are even folks that we didn't have time to reach out to or that weren't able to join and present. There's a lot of folks building in this space. So the supply is healthy and it's growing. I mean, speaking with VCs that are investing in this space, people that are getting funded in this space, it's a healthy market. And so one way you might want to think about organizing or thinking about the folks in those different spaces is to sort of group them into how they play into this infrastructure space. You definitely have smart contracts, which are very robust today. You have different sorts of storage services. You have the networks themselves like IPFS or Arweave or Filecoin. And then you have the onboarding services, which you use to get access to like Web3 storage and NFT storage. There's a bunch of different varieties of compute. There's serverless, there's batch, there's persistent. And there's also an important group of folks that are building tooling, like encryption services and other things that are supportive of this space, but don't necessarily fit into one category. And then you've got services. So people are building ML services, stable diffusion training, like with Water Lily is a great example of services. And I think you'll see that continue to be built out up the stack. And I started to try to build out a few of these, but clearly there's like a lot of folks that fit into this space. And so if you have the supply and you have the demand, what are some ways you could potentially bridge the two with the goal of making Web3 more than just DeFi and JPEGs to let people build some really interesting things in this decentralized mode? So there's been some really good starting efforts. Obviously, Masari has to be called out. They're a tremendous voice in the space. They do very detailed analysis. They just released one for decentralized finance. So they have a really good state of decentralized science. That's available now. It's tremendous content. It's a bit of a different mode of solving the problem in the sense that it's, a lot of their content is behind a paywall and some of it's written more for an investor's perspective rather than a developer's perspective. So there are some trade-offs there. There are projects like Scaffold ETH for new folks in the Web3 space, which basically package the best of according to their perspective, make it very easy to onboard. If you use a project like Scaffold ETH, you get your front-end builder, you get your back-end components and the graph and all these things kind of out of the box ready to go. They're extremely valuable onboarding techniques. Or you could just go to a major provider and say, I'm just going to use everything that you offer, like Chainlink. I'm going to use your Oracle service and your decentralized functions and stay within that ecosystem, and that's perfectly fine as well. So to think about how to try to bring the others together, there's a couple different things you could do. One, you could start just building a list of all the different supply, all the different providers, and all the different demand, and create a list. Now, rather than having one person have a list, it would also be interesting if that list was owned by a community. If the community owns it, there's lots of benefits in terms of sharing and transparency and all the things that we like about decentralization. You could have incentives for making the data accurate. You could use crypto incentives. That's been used in the past. NFTs have been used often as a way to show ownership of individual data sets. And a lot of these folks here that are building decentralized database services like ComposeDB or DBDAO or Tableland are effectively storing their data, representing it as NFTs. And then once you have that data set and once it's trusted and it's community owned, then you could effectively layer any front end on it that you need to be able to view the data. Whether it's just a person who needs to view the data, or if it's a machine service that needs to know what those services are to then route into the right service. So what would you want to know about the list of all the different decentralized compute services? You might want to know, what chains are they a part of? Are they on testnet? Are they on mainnet? How do I use the service effectively? What are the SLAs? How often is this service going to be available? How long has the service been around? Do they offer deterministic execution? Do they not? Because if you guys have seen a lot of the different presentations today, there's very smart people building out sophisticated networks. But from a new developer perspective, it can be very difficult because you really have to spend some time and kind of learn and get up to speed in how each individual project wants you to deploy their software. So you could keep track of these attributes to make it easier for a developer to onboard and just get a good sense of what the whole world looks like. And then you could also do some things to curate demand. The demand side, we were showing a list earlier of decentralized finance, decentralized social media, and all those different things. There's some work to be done there in terms of creating content with those folks, making it easier to understand for even the builders in our space in the computer data working group. What are all those people who are all those people that need decentralized compute? Why do they need decentralized compute? If they have decentralized compute, how is their product offering more valuable? So both sides need to be curated evenly. But then once you have supply listings, then you can do some interesting things on chain as well. In the decentralized finance space, there's a concept of order aggregators. And effectively, order aggregators take some liquidity, like I have some crypto token, and I want to perform some lending contract, or I want to swap them out on the back end for some other crypto token. I could go to each individual DeFi protocol and I could create a swap contract, or I could use an order router like Cow protocol or 1inch protocol. And then on the back end, they will route it to the best service that they choose for APR reasons or otherwise in the back end. Once you have that data source, that curated data source, you could do a similar thing with infrastructure. You could say, I need some infrastructure, and ultimately I want to perform some storage on a decentralized network based on my trust characteristics or determinism or whatever characteristics I care about, and then go find it. Go automatically route it for me. There's some middleware to be built to enable that scenario, but it's a potential future that could be built out once you had a nice mapping of all the scenarios. And the other component that enables then is from the Web 2 developer's perspective. When they come into Web 3, they say, oh, not only do I know how to access all these different services, but now it's very easy to me because I have a nice listing of all these different services in one place. My desire for infrastructure gets routed automatically in the back end. And then all the nice computer data working group providers on the back end, they benefit because they're getting more usage, they're getting more demand, which is a critical need for decentralized infrastructure providers right now. So, in summary, we do have a growing supply of compute providers, thankfully, with the folks that are here. We have a growing demand, and we're in a bear market, so there's some dynamics there to be taken into consideration, but in general, we're part of this process that's going to continue growing. So we have opportunity, and Web3 is becoming slowly more than just DeFi and JPEGs. And so for next steps, I'd love to get your input along the way, feedback, opinions, and other related things. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.